Hello my friends, you can see I have a harvest of a lot of tomatoes and what to do with the tomatoes. Most people like to make a tomato sauce. I like to make mine into a ketchup. And the ketchup recipe is one that my grandmother had made, and it's one of my favorites. So we're going to start with taking one onion and we're going to grate it. So I'm using my food processor here. I already cut the onion up into pieces. Now my grandmother would hand grate this with one of those little hand graters, and it probably would do a better job than what this is doing. Next I'm going to mash up 4 to 6 cloves. These were small, so I did 6. This will go in with the onions. 4 to 6 cloves and 1 onion grated. Now this is going into a saucepan. Okay, into the saucepan we're putting a little bit of olive oil, and then in goes our onion and garlic. We're going to saute this until the onions are translucent. The oil will absorb the flavors of the onion and garlic, and that will help spread it through the ketchup. Now I have 12 pounds of tomatoes, and this is roughly 1 peck, which would be 8 quarts. And we're going to cut these into smaller chunks just to help them cook and break down. Tomatoes look really nice, very ripe. Now I'm using stainless steel. My grandmother used enamel since they didn't have stainless. You don't want to use aluminum. The acid will take aluminum out of the pot and put it into the solution. Aluminum in your diet can cause or help cause Alzheimer's. You can see I have some romaine tomatoes. I'm using whatever tomatoes I had on hand. I made this with my mother years ago, and my mother made it with my grandmother right before she passed away. And my grandmother never measured, so my mother would try to write down what the ingredients were, or approximation, and that's what we're going by. Her recipe, she would make a bushel at a time, and that was her year supply. As the onions cook, and they're about ready, now we're going to start adding our tomatoes. Tomato ketchup in its early stages was usually made with old tomatoes that were spoiling, and they spiced it up, and that was one of the reasons was to be able to not throw away a lot of the produce. So it wasn't until Heinz out of Pittsburgh, which is my hometown, he started making his ketchup with fresh tomatoes, and he also would put his tomato ketchup in clear bottles because it looked good. The other ketchup all were using colored brown bottles to hide the look of the ketchup. I think if he would have tasted my grandmother's ketchup, Heinz ketchup would have a different taste. Now Heinz is a good ketchup, but it doesn't stand up to my grandmother's. These are really nice tomatoes. The only reason you have to cut these up, it helps them cook down a bit quicker. We're going to run this through a sieve after it's cooked. Okay, all the tomatoes, that's one peck, 8 quarts, 12 pounds, fit into this one pot. Okay, you can see the liquids separating. You want to have this over low to medium heat. You're going to cook it until it all gets soft. You want to stir this occasionally so nothing on the bottom will get scorched or burnt. As your tomatoes are heating, you can get your spice together, and this is what I have. 1 teaspoon of cloves, I'm using whole cloves, 2 teaspoons of paprika, 1 teaspoon of peppercorns, 1 teaspoon of salt, I'm using Himalayan salt, 1 teaspoon of cardamom, and right here this is 1 teaspoon of allspice. I'm adding 2 small sticks of cinnamon. You can also use a teaspoon of powdered cinnamon. 1/2 of a teaspoon of ginger. And 1/2 of a teaspoon of mace. If you don't have mace, use nutmeg. They're from the same seed. And 2 cups of sugar. These spices I'm going to place in a spice bag or a tea bag, and I may need to use more than one because of the amount of spice. My grandmother would put the spices in a cheesecloth. So I haven't used these before, I just hope that they do hold together. The salt will go directly into the mix, so will the sugar, and I can fish these out when they're done. So we have 1 spice bag. We're going to tie this in a knot so it doesn't open. The tomatoes are pretty much cooked and the skins are coming off. I'm going to run this through my puree. My grandmother had a tapered funnel with a wooden pestle that she would squeeze this through. Okay, at this point we add our salt, we add our sugar, add our cinnamon sticks, and then our spice bag. One more very important ingredient, and that is 1 cup of apple cider vinegar. Here is the pulp that's left, not very much. It extracted most of it. That was the juice master. You can see here I have it reduced down to half of what I started, if not a little more. Now you want to start watching it very closely so that you don't scorch the bottom. This has been reduced down to about 1/3 its original volume. It's been on the stove for 2.5 hours. And at this point we can remove our spices and find those cinnamon sticks. There's one. There's the other one. Now we're going to watch it real close. We're getting close to the finish. and we just need to thicken it up just a little bit more. And at this stage, if you're not watching it closely, you could scorch the bottom. You can see it's thickening up. It's leaving a trail when I stir. And when this cools, it's going to thicken up even more. So right here, I'm going to stop the heating and let it cool down on the stove. And then I'm going to fill the jars that are cold. And if I was going to can this, I would put them into hot jars and go through the processing. But this is going to be all used up in a short period of time. It'll be given away as gifts, and it'll all go into a refrigerator. But if you wanted to do this for long-term storage, you go through the canning process. Turn the heat off. And for ketchup, this would be runny, but you have to remember when it's cold, it's going to be thicker. If you're unsure of when to stop heating, you can do what I did. I put some in a ladle, put it in the fridge for about 10 minutes, and that is the perfect consistency. Just like Heinz. Oh, wow. 50-year flashback to my grandmother's kitchen. That's it. What a wonderful ketchup. My refrigerator test was perfect. This is the perfect consistency. Looks like it's cooked down about to 1/4 the original volume. So now as soon as this cools a little bit more, I'll put it in my container. You see it's still steaming. If it was still too runny after the refrigerator test, I could turn the heat back on and continue evaporating the liquid, but we are at the perfect consistency. It's still pretty warm. We're going to fill these jars that I saved. Look at that color, beautiful. That's why Heinz was putting them in clear glass bottles. Here's the finished ketchup. Took 3 hours of reducing the ketchup to the proper consistency. Still warm, and the taste, this is one that you can eat with a spoon. This brings me right back to my grandmother's kitchen. Wonderful ketchup. A lot of work, a lot of time. Not hard to do, it just takes a long time to reduce it down to the consistency of the ketchup. Thanks for watching, my friends. Bye-bye.